What happens when one of Hollywood's most beloved comedy legends walks onto a talk show expecting a friendly conversation, only to be blindsided by a host with an agenda? In just 34 seconds of one comment, everything fell apart. This is the story of how Greg Gutfeld destroyed his own interview with Adam Sandler in the most spectacular way possible. Adam Sandler walked onto the set of The Greg Gutfeld Show with his usual laid-back demeanor. He was there to talk about his latest film, maybe crack a few jokes, and give fans a glimpse into his creative process. The audience cheered as he took his seat across from Gutfeld. Sandler waved, flashed his signature goofy grin, and settled into the chair. But from the very first question, something felt off. Gutfeld leaned back in his chair with a smirk that didn't quite reach his eyes. "So, Adam," he began, "you've made a career out of playing the same character over and over again. When are you going to actually try acting?" The audience went silent. You could hear the discomfort rippling through the studio. Sandler's smile faltered for just a second before he recovered. He let out a small laugh, clearly trying to keep things light. "Well, Greg, I think my fans would disagree with you there," Sandler said calmly. "I've played a lot of different roles over the years. Some funny, some serious. I just try to tell stories that connect with people." Gutfeld wasn't backing down. He leaned forward, his voice dripping with condescension. "Connect with people? You mean connect with their wallets? Let's be honest, your movies are basically the same formula every time. Goofy guy, ridiculous premise, collect the paycheck. It's like you're not even trying anymore." Sandler's expression shifted. The easygoing comedian was still there, but you could see something sharper underneath. He crossed his arms and tilted his head slightly. "I work really hard on my films, Greg," Sandler said, his tone still measured but firmer. "Now. And yeah, some of them are silly. That's kind of the point. People come to my movies to laugh, to escape for a couple hours. I'm proud of that." The audience started to clap. A few people even cheered, but Gutfeld cut through the applause with another jab. "Escape from what? Good writing? Compelling plots?" Gutfeld said with a laugh, as if he'd just delivered the punchline of the century. "I mean, come on, Adam. You've got to admit that most of your recent stuff is just you and your buddies taking a vacation on someone else's dime." That was when you could see Sandler's patience starting to wear thin. His jaw tightened. He uncrossed his arms and sat up straighter in his chair. "You know what, Greg?" Sandler said, his voice steady, but with an edge to it. "I make movies with my friends because I actually like them. We have fun together. We create something people enjoy. I'm not sitting here pretending to be some highbrow intellectual. I make comedies. That's what I do, and I'm good at it." Gutfeld waved his hand dismissively. "Highbrow? No one's asking for highbrow. We're just asking for effort. For something that doesn't feel like you phoned it in from a beach in Hawaii." The audience was getting restless now. A few people booed. Others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This wasn't the fun, lighthearted interview they'd expected. This was turning into an ambush. Sandler took a deep breath. You could see him trying to decide whether to keep playing nice or to push back harder. He chose the latter. "Okay, let me ask you something, Greg," Sandler said, leaning forward. "What do you do? You sit behind a desk and make snarky comments about people who are actually out there creating things. You tear down actors, musicians, filmmakers, anyone who puts themselves out there. And for what? To make yourself feel superior?" Gutfeld's smirk faded just a little, but he tried to laugh it off. "Hey, I'm just asking the questions people are thinking." "No," Sandler interrupted, his voice rising slightly. "You're not asking questions. You're insulting me. There's a difference. If you wanted to have a real conversation about comedy, or filmmaking, or anything else, I'd be happy to do that. But this is just you, trying to get a viral moment at my expense." The studio was dead silent now. Every eye was on the two men. Gutfeld shifted in his seat, clearly not expecting Sandler to fight back this hard. I think you're being a little sensitive, Adam, Gutfeld said, trying to regain control of the situation. It's just a conversation. A conversation? Sandler repeated, his voice dripping with disbelief. You've done nothing but insult me since I sat down. You've insulted my work, my friends, my career. And now you're telling me I'm being sensitive? Gutfeld tried to cut in, but Sandler kept going. You know what the problem is with people like you, Greg? You think being mean is the same thing as being smart. You think tearing people down makes you look clever. But all it does is show everyone what kind of person you really are. The audience erupted in applause. People were on their feet, cheering for Sandler. Gutfeld looked around, his face reddening. He was losing control of his own show, and he knew it. Hey, Gutfeld said, raising his voice to be heard over the applause. This is my show. I get to ask whatever questions I want. And I get to decide whether I want to sit here and be disrespected, Sandler shot back. Which I don't. Gutfeld laughed, but it was forced and uncomfortable. Oh, come on. Don't be so dramatic. We're just having fun here. Fun? Sandler said, his voice sharp. You think this is fun? Let me tell you what's fun, Greg. Fun is making a movie with people you care about. Fun is seeing audiences laugh and connect with something you created. Fun is not sitting here while some talk show host tries to make himself look good by making me look bad. Gutfeld's face was fully red. Now. He was cornered, and everyone in the studio knew it. He tried one last time to steer the conversation back under his control. Listen, Adam, I think you're overreacting. This is just how interviews go. A little back and forth, a little friendly sparring. Sandler stood up. The sudden movement caught everyone off guard. He looked down at Gutfeld with an expression that was equal parts disappointment and disgust. Friendly, Sandler said quietly, but his voice carried through the entire studio. There's nothing friendly about this. You brought me on your show just to tear me down. And you know what? I don't have to sit here and take it. He started to unclip his microphone. Gutfeld stood up too, panic flashing across his face. Wait, Gutfeld said, his voice rising. You can't just leave. We're in the middle of an interview. Sandler dropped his microphone on the chair and turned to face Gutfeld one last time. Watch me, he said simply. The audience gasped. Camera operators didn't know where to point their cameras. Production assistants looked at each other in confusion. No one knew what to do. Gutfeld tried to grab Sandler's arm, a desperate attempt to keep him from walking off. You're really going to do this? You're going to walk out of an interview because you can't handle a few tough questions? Sandler pulled his arm away and stared at Gutfeld with an intensity that cut through all the noise. Tough questions? Sandler said, his voice low and controlled. You didn't ask me tough questions, Greg. You insulted me. You mocked my work. You dismissed everything I've built. And now you're trying to make it seem like I'm the problem? No, I'm done. Gutfeld's face went from red to almost purple. His voice got louder, more aggressive. Fine, leave then. Walk away like a child. But everyone's going to see this, Adam. Everyone's going to know that you couldn't handle a simple interview. Sandler stopped at the edge of the stage and turned back one more time. The calmness in his voice was almost eerie compared to Gutfeld's shouting. Let them see it, Greg. Let them see exactly what happened here. Let them see how you treated a guest who came on your show in good faith. Because I think when people watch this, they're going to figure out pretty quickly who the real child is. The audience exploded. People were cheering, whistling, clapping. Some were standing on their chairs. It was complete chaos. Gutfeld stood there, speechless for once in his life. His mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. He looked around at his own audience turning against him, at his crew frozen in shock, at the empty chair where his guest had been just moments before. But Sandler wasn't done. Before he left the stage completely, he turned to the audience. Thank you all for coming out tonight, he said with a genuine smile. I'm sorry you had to see this. You all deserve better. The cheers got even louder. People were chanting Sandler's name. The energy in the room had completely shifted. What was supposed to be Gutfeld's moment of glory had turned into his complete humiliation. Gutfeld tried to regain control one last time. He grabbed his microphone and shouted over the noise. "Security! Get him out of here! He's trespassing!" 2 security guards appeared from the wings, looking extremely uncomfortable. They approached Sandler hesitantly, clearly not wanting to be part of whatever this had become. Sandler held up his hands. "It's okay. I'm leaving. You don't need to escort me out." But Gutfeld wasn't satisfied. His ego was bruised. His show was in shambles, and he needed to feel like he had some kind of power back. "No! I want you thrown out!" Gutfeld screamed, his voice cracking. "You don't get to just walk away. This is my show. Mine." The security guards looked at each other, then at Sandler, then back at Gutfeld. One of them spoke quietly to Sandler, clearly apologizing. Sandler nodded and started walking toward the exit with the guards beside him, not because they were forcing him, but because they were essentially protecting him from Gutfeld's meltdown. As Sandler walked through the studio, audience members reached out to shake his hand, to pat him on the back, to tell him they supported him. He took the time to acknowledge each one, smiling, saying thank you, acting like the gracious professional he'd always been. Meanwhile, Gutfeld was left on stage, pacing back and forth, running his hands through his hair. His producers were frantically talking into their headsets. The cameras were still rolling, capturing every second of the disaster. "Cut to commercial!" someone yelled from offstage. But before they could, Gutfeld grabbed his microphone one more time. "You know what? Good riddance. We don't need Adam Sandler. This show is better off without washed-up comedians who can't take criticism." The audience booed, loudly, aggressively. People started walking out. Not just a few people, dozens of them. They filed out of the studio in protest, leaving empty seats behind them. Gutfeld watched them go, his face a mixture of rage and disbelief. He'd lost control of everything. His guest, his audience, his show, all of it had crumbled in a matter of minutes. In the hallway outside the studio, Sandler was surrounded by fans and staff members who wanted to tell him they thought Gutfeld had been out of line. He thanked them all, still maintaining his composure, even though he had every right to be furious. One young production assistant approached him nervously. "Mr. Sandler, I just want to say I'm so sorry about what happened in there. That was completely unprofessional." Sandler put a hand on the kid's shoulder and smiled. "Hey, don't worry about it. Not your fault. You guys were just doing your jobs." The production assistant looked relieved. "For what it's worth, I think you handled that perfectly. Way better than he deserved." Sandler laughed, a real genuine laugh this time. "Thanks, kid. I appreciate that." Back in the studio, the producers had finally managed to cut to commercial. Gutfeld was off camera now, screaming at his staff. How could you let him walk out like that? Why didn't anyone stop him? This is a disaster. An absolute disaster. His executive producer, a woman who'd been with the show since the beginning, finally spoke up. "Greg, maybe if you hadn't spent the entire interview insulting him, he wouldn't have left." Gutfeld spun around to face her, his eyes blazing. Insulting him? I was doing my job. I was asking real questions. Questions that needed to be asked. "No," she said firmly. "You were being cruel. There's a difference between tough questions and just being mean. And tonight, you crossed a line." Other staff members nodded in agreement. Gutfeld looked around at his own team, seeing the disappointment and frustration on their faces. "I can't believe this," he muttered. "My own. Staff is turning on me." The executive producer sighed. "We're not turning on you, Greg. We're trying to help you see what actually happened here. You had one of the biggest comedy stars in the world on your show, and you chased him away. And it's all on camera." Gutfeld slumped into his chair, the reality of the situation finally starting to sink in. The commercial break would end soon. He'd have to go back on camera and somehow salvage what was left of the show. But how could he? His guest was gone. Half his audience had walked out. The other half was probably still upset. When the cameras came back on, Gutfeld was sitting at his desk, trying to look composed, but you could see the cracks in his facade. "Well," he said, forcing a smile, "that was certainly unexpected. Adam Sandler, ladies and gentlemen, couldn't handle a little honest criticism." The remaining audience members didn't react. No laughter, no applause, just silence. Gutfeld cleared his throat and tried again. "You know, some people just can't take the heat. They want everyone to praise them all the time, tell them how great they are. But when someone points out the truth, they run away." Still nothing from the audience. One brave soul in the back shouted, "You were rude to him!" Gutfeld's smile disappeared. "Excuse me? I was doing my job. I was asking questions." "You were being a jerk!" someone else yelled. The floodgates opened. More people started shouting, calling out Gutfeld for his behavior. The host sat there, his face getting redder and redder, his hands gripping the edge of his desk. Okay, that's enough," he yelled into his microphone. "If you don't like the show, you're welcome to leave." And they did. More people stood up and walked out. The cameras captured every single person leaving, their faces showing disappointment and disgust. Gutfeld watched them go, his mouth hanging open. This was supposed to be his show, his moment, his platform. And it was all falling apart. By the time the exodus ended, the studio looked half empty. The energy was completely gone. What was left of the audience sat in uncomfortable silence. Gutfeld tried to continue the show. He introduced the next segment, made a few jokes, attempted to move on like nothing had happened. But it was painfully obvious that nothing was okay. His delivery was off. His timing was wrong. He kept glancing at the empty seats, at the crew members who wouldn't make eye contact with him. During the next commercial break, his executive producer came up to him. "Greg, we need to talk about this." "Not now," Gutfeld snapped. "We're in the middle of a show." "A show that's falling apart," she said bluntly. "We need to address what happened." "Address it? What do you want me to do? Apologize? I didn't do anything wrong." She looked at him with something close to pity. "If you really believe that, then we have a much bigger problem than I thought." Gutfeld stood up and got in her face. "I built this show. Me. Not Adam Sandler. Not you. Not anyone else. Me. And I'm not going to let one temperamental actor ruin it." "He's not the one who ruined it, Greg," she said quietly. "You are." The words hung in the air between them. Before Gutfeld could respond, they were back from commercial. He had to return to his desk, to his cameras, to the disaster he'd created. The rest of the show was painful to watch. Gutfeld stumbled through his segments, his confidence shattered. The audience barely responded to anything he said. His jokes fell flat. His commentary felt hollow. When the show finally ended, Gutfeld didn't do his usual cheerful sign-off. He simply said, "That's our show. Good night," and walked off the set without another word. In his dressing room, he sat alone, staring at his reflection in the mirror. His phone was blowing up with messages. Texts from colleagues, emails from network executives, notifications from social media showing that clips of the interview were already going viral. He picked up his phone and scrolled through the comments. They were brutal. Gutfeld completely disrespected Adam Sandler for no reason. Why would you treat a guest like that? So unprofessional. Team Sandler all the way. Gutfeld showed his true colors tonight. "I used to watch this show, but not anymore. That was disgusting." Comment after comment, all saying the same thing. Gutfeld had messed up. Badly. He threw his phone across the room, watching it bounce off the wall and clatter to the floor. His hands were shaking. His breathing was rapid. The reality of what he'd done, of how badly he'd miscalculated, was finally hitting him. There was a knock on his dressing room door. "Go away!" Gutfeld shouted. The door opened anyway. It was his executive producer again. "We need to talk," she said, stepping inside and closing the door behind her. "I said go away. And I said we need to talk. Now." Gutfeld turned to face her, his expression hostile. "What could you possibly have to say to me right now?" She took a deep breath. "The network has been calling. They're not happy, Greg. Not happy at all. Of course they're not happy, but they'll get over it. This will blow over in a few days." She shook her head. "I don't think you understand how bad this is. The clips are everywhere. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, millions of views already, and every single comment is on Sandler's side." "So what?" Gutfeld said defensively. "People love drama. This is probably the most attention the show has gotten in months." "It's the wrong kind of attention, Greg. You look like a bully. You look mean-spirited and petty. And Adam Sandler looks like a professional who tried to keep things civil until he couldn't take it anymore." Gutfeld wanted to argue, to defend himself, but deep down, he knew she was right. He'd seen the clips himself, seen how he came across. Angry, condescending, cruel. "What do you want me to do?" He asked quietly. "I think you need to apologize. Publicly. Before this gets any worse." Gutfeld's head snapped up. Apologize? To Adam Sandler? Absolutely not. That would make me look weak. "You already look weak, Greg. You look like someone who can't handle a guest disagreeing with them. An apology might actually make you look stronger. It would show that you can admit when you've made a mistake." "I didn't make a mistake," Gutfeld insisted, but his voice lacked conviction. The executive producer sat down across from him. "Yes, you did. And if you can't see that, then I don't know how to help you." They sat in silence for a long moment. Outside the dressing room, they could hear the crew packing up equipment, people talking in hushed voices about what had just happened. Finally, Gutfeld spoke. "Do you think he'll accept an apology?" "I don't know," she admitted, "but I think you owe him one, regardless." Gutfeld rubbed his face with his hands. His carefully constructed image, his reputation as a sharp-witted host who could spar with anyone, all of it had crumbled in one disastrous interview. And the worst part, he had no one to blame but himself. Meanwhile, across town, Adam Sandler was back at his hotel. He'd changed out of his TV appearance clothes and into a comfortable hoodie and jeans. His phone was ringing constantly, but he'd turned it off. He just wanted a moment of peace. There was a knock at his hotel room door. He opened it to find his manager standing there, tablet in hand. "You need to see this," his manager said, walking into the room. "See what?" His manager pulled up the video of the interview. "It's everywhere, Adam. Everyone's talking about it." Sandler watched the clip, seeing himself stand up, seeing Gutfeld's face turn red, seeing the audience's reaction. It was surreal to watch it from the outside. "What are people saying?" he asked. His manager scrolled through the comments. "They're on your side. Completely. People are calling Gutfeld out for being disrespectful. You're trending on every platform." Sandler nodded slowly. "I didn't want this to turn into a big thing. I just wanted to do an interview and go home." "I know. But Gutfeld made it a big thing, and you handled it with grace. You didn't lose your temper. You didn't get aggressive. You just stood up for yourself." "Yeah," Sandler said quietly. "I guess I did." His manager put a hand on his shoulder. "For what it's worth, I'm proud of you. You could have gone off on him, really let him have it. But you took the high road." Sandler smiled a little. "My mom always taught me that. Kill them with kindness, or just walk away. Don't stoop to their level." "Smart woman, your mom." "Yeah, she was." They sat together for a while, watching as the video continued to rack up views and comments. The narrative was clear. Adam Sandler was the hero of this story, and Greg Gutfeld was the villain. Back at the studio, Gutfeld was still in his dressing room, still trying to figure out how to fix what he'd broken. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized there might not be a way to fix it. Not really. The damage was done. He'd gone into that interview thinking he could take Adam Sandler down a peg, could show everyone how smart and cutting edge he was. Instead, he'd shown the world exactly what kind of person he really was. And it wasn't pretty. The night ended with two very different men in two very different places. Adam Sandler, surrounded by support and respect, knowing he'd done the right thing by walking away. And Greg Gutfeld, alone in his dressing room, facing the consequences of his own arrogance and cruelty. Sometimes, the person you underestimate is exactly the person who will teach you the hardest lesson. And tonight, Greg Gutfeld learned that lesson in the most public, most humiliating way possible. He thought he could push around a comedy legend and get away with it. He thought being mean was the same as being clever. He thought his platform gave him the right to disrespect anyone who sat across from him. He was wrong about all of it, and now the whole world knew it.